Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. The lights will come on for the first of 3 straight night games at Ross-Ade Stadium on Saturday evening as the Boilermakers host Syracuse in a rematch of last season's epic battle in the Dome. Today on the show, we will preview the Orange and look at what the Boilermakers need to do to finish the non-conference slate above 500 for the 3rd year in a row. Then, 2 weeks into the season, it looks like the Big Ten West could be awfully wide open yet again. Is there reason for optimism? Big picture with Purdue there. Plus, it's always time to answer your questions on these midweek shows. Thank you to all of you who sent those over on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. Looking forward to wrapping up the show by answering your questions. I'm pumped for this one, guys. It's an exciting time. Purdue's fresh off a win, a sold-out crowd in Ross-Ade Stadium. It's going to be a good one this weekend. If you don't already, though, be sure to follow on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. I'll be tweeting throughout the game on there all week leading up to the game and with plenty of thoughts, fallout from whatever happens on Saturday night in Ross-Ade. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. 2 episodes a week right now, so you don't want to miss those. And you're always welcome, too, with questions to email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Getting into this one, though, Purdue versus Syracuse, a 7:30 kickoff from Ross-Ade Stadium, nationally televised on NBC. That's right, folks. NBC gave the Big Ten the big bucks so it could broadcast Purdue and Syracuse. Reading into some history from my good friend at goldenblack.com, Alan Karpick, it sounds like this is the first time NBC has ever broadcast a game in Ross-Ade Stadium. It sounds like the games at Notre Dame obviously have been on NBC, and the 1967 Rose Bowl was on NBC when Purdue defeated Southern Cal 14-13. So a new one there as the Big Ten makes its first season debut on NBC, and Purdue will get its first game. Obviously, the big storyline here, it's a rematch of last season's game from Syracuse, week 3 of last season as well. Game was a mess. Game was a disaster. Purdue got off to a slow start. Really, the game got off to a slow start. It was like 9-7 going to the 4th quarter. And then sparks flew in every single possible direction. Syracuse touchdown with 7 seconds to go to seal it. One of the more disappointing Purdue losses in recent memory. That thing was a disaster. This year, Purdue certainly looks much different. Syracuse, not as much. The Orange enter 2-0, but this is going to be their first real test of the season. It's sometimes hard, and as we try to evaluate what Purdue is even, the lack of data points, the lack of knowledge that we have about these teams early on sometimes makes it difficult to really know what we're dealing with. That's certainly going to be the case with Syracuse here. A 65-0 win over Colgate in week 1, a 48-7 win over Western Michigan last week. So, Syracuse has faced 2 lesser opponents. They've dominated them both, as you would like the Orange to do if you're a Syracuse partisan. But it's hard to really tell how good they really are. Last season, Syracuse started 6-0, got into the top 25, lost a hard-fought game at Clemson, and things kind of fell off from there. Syracuse finished just 7-6. Dino Babers fought off the hot seat talk for a little bit, but by no means is he getting a lifetime contract in upstate New York right now. Looking at this team, Garrett Schrader is back at quarterback, 3rd straight season for him at the helm for Syracuse. If you're a real college football diehard, you'll remember him at Mississippi State before he was at Syracuse. He's looking for some consistency. To this point in his career, he's shown some nice flashes. From 2021 to last year, he raised his completion percentage big time. I think he went from like 53% to 65%. That's sizable improvement. You really like to see that. But his touchdown to interception ratio got worse. Just 9 touchdowns to 7 picks last year. 3 of those 9 touchdowns came against Purdue. So, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to tell what you've got here. He was sub 50% passing against Purdue last year. He was 13 of 29. But he got those 3 touchdowns, and he threw a perfect ball to the corner on the game-winning touchdown with 7 seconds to go. What makes him interesting, though, is that he's a very good runner. He's very good using his legs. Carried it for over 80 yards against Purdue last year on almost 20 attempts. He ran the ball quite a bit. I'll be interested to see what Purdue does with its defensive scheme on him. Does Purdue kind of use O.C. Brothers as a spy? Does Purdue drop one of its outside linebackers as a spy? Does it just say, all right, go get them and rush 5, maybe bring some of those pass rush packages in that Purdue has? We'll see. I'm going to be interested to see what happens there, though. In their run game, they lost the star tailback, the Twitter famous Sean Tucker. They're going more of a committee approach so far this year. To each their own. You don't need to have a single dominant tailback to have a good run game. Syracuse is an interesting one because with Schrader, the run splits are going to be over 50%. But with the amount of times that he scrambles, it's much more of a 50-50 attack. If Syracuse can, I think it wants to run the ball more than it wants to pass the ball. It's going to be the most run-heavy approach that Purdue has seen to this point in the season. Something to keep an eye on. Oronde Gadsden II, he's their pass-catching tight end who lines up, kind of all over the place. Inline tight end, out in the slot. He's a big, real good receiver. Top receiver for them last season. Last week, he left the game early, I think first drive, with a leg injury. Came back to the sidelines in a boot and crutches. Dino Babers hasn't said anything about his status. He doesn't have to. The ACC does not have any injury disclosure regulations like the Big Ten does. So keep an eye out there for number 19 in pregame warmups because he may be their most dynamic player on offense. He's someone who's going to play on Sundays, I think. He's really good. In his absence, though, they do have a couple of big receivers. They got a guy at 6'3", got a guy at 6'4". That's going to be, something to monitor. Purdue hasn't really faced that this year. The best receiver last week, Ollie Jennings, got hurt right away. Purdue did struggle against the real little dude from Fresno State. He tore him apart. But how Purdue handles that, that's going to be interesting to see. Syracuse is really big on the offensive line. 300-plus pounds across the board. It doesn't mean everything, but it tends to be better than the alternative. See how they hold up. The 3-3-5 defense. We talked about this last year because Syracuse has gone with this for a while. It was Tony White. He is now the defensive coordinator at Nebraska after doing a pretty good job at Syracuse. And, really, he's off to a pretty good start at Nebraska. Syracuse went out and got Rocky Long, kind of the pioneer of the 3-3-5 defense. One of the most experienced guys on the defensive side of the ball in the country. He's like 75 years old. He's been around for a real long time. I had a question on Twitter about this defense, though. It's interesting because the 3-3-5 can move around and give you so many looks. And Ryan Walters has talked about this in his pregame press conference on Monday, on his radio show just a couple hours before I recorded this. It's going to give you a lot of different looks. That fifth defensive back, that rover, they can move him around quite a bit. Syracuse is not tremendously big up front. So the whole goal of this is to try to stop the run with 6 guys. If you can do that and you can commit 5 to the back end, boy, you're in a really good spot. It wants to bring pressure in the pass game from a number of different looks in that front 6. Bring 5 guys, bring 4 guys, bring 6, but give that back end a chance to survive out there. If Purdue can run the ball, then it's in really good shape here. The question I have, we talked about this a little bit on Sunday's post-game episode. Purdue is not running the ball on a down-to-down basis tremendously effectively right now. Purdue is hitting some big plays. We saw last week, and I think we did the math on the show a little bit, it was somewhere around 80 of Purdue's rushing yards came on 4 explosive plays. And that's good. You want to have explosive plays. That's really good. But when you break that down, on a down-to-down basis, Purdue's not running the ball tremendously effectively. In both of its first 2 games, Purdue has finished with negative EPA when running the ball, expected points added. So running the ball from a real advanced metrics, it's not helping Purdue a whole lot. Now, that doesn't mean you abandon the run. That's not at all what I'm suggesting here. And Purdue is very close to, breaking even on EPA running the ball against Virginia Tech. But you'd like to see Purdue turn those gains of 0 or 1 or those stuffs in the backfield into getting to the line of scrimmage, getting 3-4 yards. I know it's not easy, and I know Purdue football has not run the ball particularly effectively in a long time. But that's kind of how you defeat this 3-3-5 defense. Because if you can run the ball on their 6-man front and you make that rover suck in and make it a front 7, then you open up that back end. You get them out of what they want to do. So to kind of answer the question about the defense, that's what you want to do. Rocky Long knows his stuff, though. He's going to be well prepared. He's going to be prepared for what Purdue wants to do, even though it's more of a cutting-edge offense. Rocky Long's seen about all there is to see. To this point, his defense has dominated 2 lesser opponents. Just 12 first downs for opponents on the year, 1 touchdown by Western Michigan, no points for Colgate. Big step up here, but we'll see what Syracuse can do. Looking at the injury report a bit, Gus Hartwig is listed as Purdue's starting center on the depth chart this week. Ryan Walters did not commit to him playing for sure. Of course, that was Monday. He doesn't have to. But keep an eye on that injury report coming out about 5:30 on Saturday. We'll see where he's listed at. If he's ready to go, then keep an eye on how much he plays. Does he play every snap? Purdue played all 5 offensive linemen every snap last week. See if Purdue rotates at all when he gets back in. Garrett Miller did not see a ton of reps last week in his first game back. It makes sense. You don't want to push a guy too much. He hasn't played in a live game, hadn't played in a live game since December of 2021. Once that field got all wet, you really don't want to mess with stuff, with it being a knee injury. Let's keep an eye on how much he plays, especially a balance of him and Max Clare, who looks like the real deal. Also, Paul Paferi has been on the injured list. I have no idea what's going on there. I have no idea when he's going to come back. Ryan Walters is not going to talk about injuries on his radio show. That's something I tune into. With the injury report, he's not going to do that. That's fine. But if Paul Paferi does come back, what does his role look like there? And then Salim Turner Muhammad. Let's not forget about him, the transfer corner from Stanford. He's not played to this point. I have no idea when he's going to be back, but you'd like to see him sooner rather than later. Big Ten play starts next Friday, and Purdue could use some help on the back end. All right, 3 questions I've got here. about Purdue heading into this one, or, really just in general about this game. Number one is, can we start to see some more consistency from the Purdue offense? You look at that Virginia Tech game, and there were some very real positives. Purdue sustained some drives well. That first drive of the game was a masterpiece. The second drive of the game was off to a really nice start before the game was delayed. Purdue put together a nice drive on the last touchdown drive, the Hudson Card touchdown to put Purdue ahead. And before that, it had moved the ball fairly well, stalled out, and Ben Freehill missed from 50 yards. But there was a massive scoring drought. Purdue goes 5 drives in a row without a first down. That was part of a 7-drive scoreless drought. Look, against better opponents, you cannot go 7 drives without scoring and expect to win. That's just not gonna fly. I don't know how good Virginia Tech is or isn't. I have my thoughts after last week, but that's not something you're going to be able to bank on week in, week out and get away with it. How much do we see from Purdue? Can they cut down on the 3 and outs? Can they manufacture some scoring drives? One thing to note, you'll take it however you can get it. But another one of Purdue's touchdown drives started on a real short field from the 24 or something after Cam Allen's interception. So that's 2 of your 7 touchdown drives through 2 games that have come from real short fields, because you had the one against Fresno State that started in the red zone. Let's see if Purdue can be a little more consistent moving the ball. Number 2, how does Purdue contain a very mobile quarterback? As we talked about in the open a little bit, Garrett Schrader can kill you on the ground if you let him. Purdue hasn't seen that in Mikey Keene or Grant Wells. Wells could move with his feet a little bit, but not in the way Garrett Schrader can. Garrett Schrader's a really good athlete. There was a reason Mississippi State lined him up at receiver a few times. He's a legit athlete. What does Purdue do? I'm very interested to see this because we haven't seen it a ton yet with what Purdue wants to do. On those obvious drop back downs, does Purdue rush 5? Does Purdue rush 4? When you do that, if you bring 5 guys, you leave some stuff to chance on the back end. He's most dangerous when he's outside of the pocket and making plays with his feet or extending plays to throw downfield. So I'm interested to see how Purdue does there. And then number 3, how much of Purdue's run defense had to do with Purdue's run defense being good, and how much of it had to do with Virginia Tech just having a bad offensive line and really not a very good run game? 11 rushing yards for Virginia Tech last week. The truth, the reality is probably somewhere in the middle of whether that was Purdue's defense just being dominant up front or Virginia Tech's offensive line really struggling. But as we move forward, especially against a team that wants to run the ball a little bit more, you'd like to know this about Purdue, because what's coming next? In those first 3 Big Ten games, teams are going to want to run the ball on Purdue. Wisconsin's going to, Illinois is going to, Iowa sure as hell is going to. So this will be a good idea here of how good Purdue really is against the run. A few thoughts about this game. There's a massive difference between being 2-1 and 1-2 going into conference play. And I feel like a baseball pitching coach here talking about the importance of what happens on a 1-1 pitch. But where Purdue is, this is a massive swing game. It goes a long way when it comes to bowl eligibility because you have 9 games in Big Ten play. This is the difference as to whether you need to go above 500 in Big Ten play or if you can go 4-5 and still make a bowl game. You have a couple almost certain losses with Ohio State and Michigan. If you don't want to pencil those in as losses, you don't have to. Purdue's going to be massive underdogs there. Probably going to be double-digit dogs at Iowa. See what they are in a few other games where they're not going to be favored. So you take a little bit more pressure off yourself if you can win this game. Because if not, and you go into Big Ten play at 1-2, having lost at home twice already, it's an uphill climb to a bowl game. It's not impossible, but it's an uphill climb. I think in general, and this is not necessarily fair to say because last year's team and this year's team are very different, coaching, personnel, all of it. But losing both games of this home and home would be a pretty real disappointment if you ask me. It's not like, the Monday headlines across the country would be, oh, Purdue lost a home and home to Syracuse. That's not reality. No one outside of the two fan bases would really put 2 and 2 together there. But I think from a Purdue perspective, it would be a bit of a bummer. Syracuse is not that good of a program to the point where it's someone you would be comfortable getting swept with in a home and home. And that's not to take anything away from last year because Purdue accomplished everything you could have hoped. It did that in spite of a loss at Syracuse. But can Purdue get this win? You really want to avoid that. A huge revenge spot here. Purdue had nobody to blame but itself last season for that loss, but incredibly disappointing. You know that even though half of Purdue's locker room has turned over from last year, including all of the coaches, the ones who were around, they're going to want to get some revenge here. Money came in on Syracuse early. The Purdue opened up as a 2.5-point favorite. That flipped to Syracuse even money, or that flipped to a pick'em right away, and then money came in on Syracuse even more. Syracuse sits at 2 as a 2.5-point favorite as I record this. Total is sitting at 58.5. I don't have a great feel for this game. Syracuse is very unknown. I don't know. It's still early enough that I don't know how good Purdue is or isn't. I'm 0-2 picking games against the spread and picking the total, so I don't know that you should take my prediction for much. I'll go Purdue 31-28 here. Syracuse is going to be able to put up some points. Schrader is good enough that he'll put up some points. I'm betting on Hudson Card here to have a big game. I'm betting on Purdue to feed off of what should be a really good atmosphere at Ross-Ade Stadium. It's sold out. It's the first night game of the year. There should be some juice. I'm going to give Purdue the benefit of the doubt here. I really don't know what to make of this, though. This is going to be one of those games. Like I said about Fresno State, either team could win this game by 10 to 14 points, and I would not be tremendously shocked. If you get more than that in either direction, then I'll be pretty surprised. I think these are going to be two pretty evenly matched teams. I think this is going to come down to the wire. I think you're still going to be in your seat with 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Before I get into the Q&A, I did want to at least touch on, the beyond portion of Boilers and Beyond. Looking across the Big Ten West right now, this division doesn't look so hot. Last week, Wisconsin goes out to the Palouse. It loses to Washington State, and in the process, looks really poor on offense. Week 1, Wisconsin ran the ball a little bit more in its season opener. Buffalo, it might have been. It was a group of 5 team. Last week, it tried to throw the ball a fair amount. I've said all along, I don't know how much Wisconsin's actually going to be an air raid team, but so far, things don't look great for the Badgers. Iowa, who was my pick to win the West, who I was very high on, and I still do feel good about, it's a little bit of a slow start. 24 points against Utah State, just 20 against Iowa State, including a pick 6. Cade McNamara's a little banged up, but keep an eye on Iowa. They don't exactly look great. Minnesota's offense does not look tremendously strong. 13 points against Nebraska, just 25 against Eastern Michigan last week. I don't know. I don't know that Callie McManus is going to be some game-changing quarterback there. Nebraska's a disaster. what they did out in Boulder last week was an abomination. Jeff Sims is terrible. Illinois is not replicating the 8-win season from last year. Again, last week, go out to Lawrence, Kansas. They did not look particularly strong. Big loss for them. I don't want to say, I'm not going to be the Purdue guy who says it's all Ryan Walters. A lot of NFL talent, a lot of quality players departed that roster from last year, but Illinois is not as strong as it was last season. Northwestern's ready for it to be Thanksgiving already. That's going to get bad. That's already bad. That's going to get worse as the season goes on. By no means am I sitting here saying that Purdue can win this thing. We've got to see a lot more about Purdue first. Purdue's got to prove a lot more than it has to this point. But this division, which gets a lot of publicity for being remarkably average at best, might be a little bit below average yet again this season. Not looking particularly strong. But nationally, with college football, this season's going to be a blast. If you're if you're one of those who follows it at a national level pretty good, this season's going to be awesome. There are really good teams across the country. You have teams out in the Pac-12 that are good. In the Big 12, Texas just beat Alabama and Bryant-Denny. That's remarkably impressive. You have Florida State in the ACC. They're a playoff contender. The SEC, plenty of good teams still. Georgia kind of leading the pack there. You got 3 teams out in the Big Ten East that are real playoff national title contenders. This season's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. This is awesome stuff. But I just want to talk about those 2 things real quick. Getting into the Q&A, however, NBC broadcast, new announcers for Purdue, had a question about that. Noah Eagle, the son of Ian Eagle, the CBS commentator, Noah Eagle will do the play-by-play, and I looked him up the other day. Noah Eagle's like 12 months older than I am. He's 25 years old. National broadcast at 25 years old. Not bad. Todd Blackledge, the longtime veteran on the color commentary, he will be there. I don't know if he still does his Taste of the Town. I know he's been to Bruno's for that segment when he was at ESPN. And then Catherine Tappan on the sidelines. And the question asked about, brought up that it's a great opportunity for the Purdue brand on national TV. Absolutely. This, for as great of the college football season as this is going to be, this Saturday is not particularly saturated with great games. And especially in that night slate. I'm pulling up the schedule right now, but this weekend's games are not particularly loaded at night. You're competing against Tennessee, Florida. That's a good one. That's one that a lot of eyes are going to be on. Washington, Michigan State's on Peacock, so I don't know that will get a ton of eyeballs. Backyard Brawl, Pitt, West Virginia, maybe. BYU, Arkansas. A lot of games aren't fantastic here in the night slate. So there should be some good eyeballs on this. It should be a good environment, good atmosphere in Ross-Ade Stadium. And, it's a chance for Purdue to look good in front of some eyeballs that don't see Purdue a whole lot. The same goes for Syracuse. Good opportunity for both schools. A question here, is Syracuse's offense the toughest test for Purdue's defense so far? They're averaging the 3rd most points in the country so far, but how much of that is the competition? In terms of the toughest test for the defense, it's either Fresno State or Syracuse. Little weary of Fresno State here. Last week, Fresno State went to double overtime with FCS Eastern Washington. Not great. Only 24 points for Fresno State in regulation. Not great. Mikey Keene's stat line was not remotely as impressive as it was against Purdue. Although that little receiver, Eric Brooks, he's good. He's going to be all Mountain West at this rate. He's a good player. Certainly not Virginia Tech. They're a touchdown underdog at Rutgers this weekend. I don't think things are particularly good in Blacksburg. Virginia Tech went 3-8 last year. I'd be a little bit surprised if it got to 5 wins this year. I don't think that team's particularly good. It doesn't sound like things are great there. Schrader's running ability. I've said it a couple times already. That's going to provide the toughest test part of this, I think. We saw a good passing game in Fresno State, but Purdue's secondary has been exploitable. I think Schrader can exploit that, but also Ryan Walters talks a lot about Purdue needing to stay disciplined, and this is a spot where you have to be very disciplined against a running quarterback, because if someone's out of position, if a defensive back jumps too quick, or if someone's a step slow from the linebacker spot, then something comes open on the back end, or Schrader has a ton of room to run. You've got to be very disciplined and quick to react with him. So I do think a lot of the Syracuse's results, third most points in the country, that stems from weaker competition. Syracuse is not going to finish with a top 5 offense in the country. It just won't. It could be good. It could be a good offense. It won't be top 5 good. But it's done what you want it to do. Colgate is a bad FCS team with 4 straight losing seasons. Western Michigan, last in the division in the MAC in the preseason poll. So, you're playing a school named after toothpaste. You're playing a last place MAC team. You did what you're supposed to do. Syracuse dominated them. Now we'll see what they can do against Power 5 competition. How important is it to have Garrett Miller and Gus Hartwig back, even if they're not 100%? You always want your best players out there. That much is for certain. With Garrett Miller, what we saw last week was that the tight end might be a little bit of the security blanket of this offense, where that may be the check down option quite a bit. We saw Max Clare, 8 catches, 64 yards. Simple math, Purdue math people, 8 yards per catch. One of those catches was over 20 yards, so a lot of short stuff. That's okay. If he's the check down, quick out option, that's fine. Someone's got to do it. The tight end can absolutely do it. But with Clare and also with Garrett Miller, it's nice to have that athletic pass-catching option, and that's exactly what Garrett Miller is. He's someone who can break a tackle. He's someone who can run over, a smaller defensive back. Getting an option like that out there, very nice to have. With Hartwig, at 100%, he's a sizable upgrade over Kaltenberger and Johnson. The difference between Hartwig and Kaltenberger is bigger than the difference between Kaltenberger and Johnson. Getting Hartwig back really helps out the offensive line. We saw the significance of his loss last November when he got hurt. Hartwig's also a captain, so from a leadership perspective, that's good. But you just always want your best players out there. This helps Purdue get its best roster on the field on Saturdays. Drink of water real quick. All right, sorry about that. Last year against Syracuse, we saw a lack of discipline as the outlier of what cost Purdue in the end of the game. How vital will that be if it's close at the end of this game? Yeah, Purdue can't afford what happened last year in Syracuse. That was absurd. That game just got emotionally charged as can be. I don't know. I wasn't there. It seemed like it was a pretty rowdy environment. You're in a dome, so I assume it was pretty loud in there. I know the reputation the East Coasters have as not the friendliest fans to go play in front of. Apologies to any of you from the East Coast. Those of us in Indiana have our own stereotypes for the East Coast folks, but whatever it was, Purdue got very rattled, and I don't think you'll see that. And so much of that game this week has been pinned on Jeff Brom. I mean, whatever. You can do that. Some of that does come back to coaching, but Payne Durham was a guy who Purdue had kind of looked at as the leader of the team. He gets flagged for a couple of penalties. That's a problem. I think the officials were quick to throw flags in an emotionally charged game. Okay, it is what it is. Purdue's got to be disciplined in all aspects, though, both in terms of just simple execution, in terms of stuff after the whistle, in terms of emotions. You gotta hold it together. I don't think we've seen any red flags there yet, but you never know. What can Purdue take away from its performance before and after the rain delay? After the rain delay, my guy Miles says it looks like a completely different team. Yeah, I mean, the offense didn't do a whole lot coming out of the delay. Purdue's first play was a false start. It punts. It then kicks a field goal, gets a short field touchdown, and then goes on that big scoreless drought. So I guess it's a weird spot to be in. Undoubtedly, Virginia Tech made any adjustments it needed to. If Purdue came out of the locker room at the start of the game and did anything that Virginia Tech wasn't expecting, the Hokies had 5 hours to watch film on it, diagnose something, not call something if Purdue was exploiting it. It's not like I have as trained of an eye as these guys to see it, but it's an entirely different game at that point. I think, if anything, Purdue can just take away how to hold it together. They can take away a lot of positives as to how it held that game together when it could have gotten out of hand. Virginia Tech scores 17 straight to tie the game at halftime. Purdue showed some resiliency to hold on to that thing, because that was not exactly a rowdy environment. It was a little sleepy. It was half full after the rain delay. It's on the road. It's sat there all day. It's undoubtedly ready to get home. It finds a way to win that game. And I think that's the biggest thing you take away from it as a real positive, a real sign of toughness with the team. And Miles also asked, after a home game and an away game, how do you think Coach Walters has handled expectations? I guess it just depends what your expectations were. To me, I've seen no red flags from him at this point, so that's a positive. Now, I don't know that 2 games is a tremendous amount of time. I guess if you look at past coaches, Jeff Brom looked great through 2 games, took Louisville to the wire, beat Ohio pretty good. Darrell Hazel, obvious problem. Blown out at Cincinnati, needs an interception late to hold on against Indiana State. There was something wrong. Danny Hope beats Toledo, takes Oregon to the wire out in Eugene. A really good performance by Purdue. 4 games later, Purdue was 1-5, and there were problems. But through 2 games, no problem. Joe Tiller, you know the story. Lost at Toledo, beat Notre Dame. Things went all right there. So, through 2 games, it's not like you can make a massive judgment. But, I mean, Vegas said 6 wins and above would be exceeding expectations. That's absolutely on the table for Purdue. So you're happy there. One thing I'll note, a game management note. I do not like criticizing coaches' game management too much. Ryan Walters got a lot of criticism for that in week 1. And at the time, I'd have to listen to my episode again. I don't know how much I said. I did have some, curiosity about things he did in that first game. We saw him go for 4th and 1 in his own territory again against Virginia Tech, and it did not get converted. Virginia Tech turned that into 3 points. That's something I'm interested in monitoring. When we've seen anything questionable from a game management standpoint, anything bold, it's been on the aggressive side of things. Purdue had a 4th and goal at the 1 against Fresno State. It goes for it instead of kicking. the book definitely tells you to do that. The advanced metrics that all these coaches have access to, they tell you to do that. Purdue, there was another one that I was just thinking of from Fresno State. Now I don't know what it was, but Purdue's been on the aggressive side of things so far this season. Is that his MO? If so, that's surprising from a defensive coach, but I think it's probably a good sign in the, kind of at the end of things. But going for 4th and 1 when you're in your own territory, that's aggressive. That's very, very aggressive. Long term, I want to see how that plays out. But how has Walters managed expectations? Fine by me, and I think you'd have to be pretty far out there to find someone real upset about how Ryan Walters has performed to this point. And I finally wanted to close on one last thought that's been eating at me about the comparison of the talent that Jeff Brom inherited from Darrell Hazell compared to the talent that Ryan Walters inherited from Jeff Brom. I need a few years on this. One thing's becoming abundantly clear. Dylan Thieneman is really, really good, and Nick Scorton is really, really good. Those two guys alone could really alter this, because you have to give him credit for everything he left. And Thieneman's a recruit of Brom still. He committed to play for Brom. That's not a Walters class. Thieneman's really good. Scorton's really good. Burks, Maccabee, they're good. Yassine's starting to turn around. If Max Clare is really good, he looked the part. Purdue has some talent on this team. To say that it's not talented is not the case. I want a few years on this, because if this team has some NFL guys, it's not like there were a ton of NFL dudes that Brom inherited either. So give me a few years on that. Someone, one of my longtime listeners, you guys can track this. Come poke me in a couple years, early 2025 season or something. We'll talk about it then, because Hazell maybe had some more upper class talent that he left for Jeff Brom, but he also didn't lose 8 NFL draft picks in his final 2 years either, like Jeff Brom did over the last 2 years at Purdue. So that's where I'll leave this. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. We're at 43 minutes. It's been a while. Thank you if you're still listening at this point. Follow along on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. We'll be there throughout the weekend talking about the game. Send me an email, send me a DM, tweet at me. Any questions you have for Sunday's reaction podcast, I will be sure to hit on all that. On Sunday to talk about the game, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss it. And until then, safe travels to those of you coming into West Lafayette. Take care and enjoy the game.